Hi everyone, I'm Scott Schneider. This is Stereo Niche. Hey, this week we're going to talk about my first Mac piece. Stick around. All right, so let's talk about McIntosh. So this is an MA6100. It's an integrated amp, and it was manufactured from McIntosh from 1972 to 1979, and it's 70 watts per channel. So I decided this is my first review of any McIntosh gear, and the reason I haven't really done any is because Mac is pretty much, it's very basic. I find it to be very basic. They're not flashy. Macintosh builds very high quality gear, and they have from the outset, and they didn't approach it from any gimmicky sort of perspective. But the gear from the 70s is, I think, very similar. The look of it, the functionality, they didn't have a lot of gimmickry, I'll say, but I think they took quite some time to add features that other manufacturers were already adding. They had the same look. If you look at any Macintosh piece from the 70s, they absolutely look very similar. You have to look very closely and look at the model numbers to differentiate them. So kind of for that reason, I didn't really jump into hurrying up to do a review, because I almost felt like if I did one, it was going to be very similar to all the others. So I wasn't in a huge hurry, but I decided to start with the MA6100 because it just seems to not get much attention. They seem to be, the integrated amps of that era seem to be under the radar a bit. Most of the focus is on the separates, the preamps, and the amps. So I thought, I'll start with the integrated. And I love this little integrated. I think it's a very nice unit. Anything from Macintosh is good. Let's just get that off, from the outset here. Macintosh doesn't build or didn't build any low-end units. Their stuff is pretty much, for the most part, but there's exceptional units that are more exotic, and I'll say lower volume, higher spec in some cases, but Macintosh was pretty tried and true from the beginning that they were going to build better quality gear, and they stuck to it. Their chassis were, very standardized, their cabinets were very standardized, and they just built very quality products, but they're also still supporting them. You can go to the Macintosh site. I'm going to show you, I leveraged several pictures from their site because they still have it out there. You can go and look up any unit, you can look up the specs, you can download the manual, and you can still get, parts from them, and they still support everything. And that's can't be said for any other manufacturer. At best, you can get some third-party support for some Dynaco products, but Mac is the only one that still puts out, support for their older gear. So when you buy Mac, that's what you get. You're getting, the ability to support the older gear, and you're going to pay for that, but you're going to pay a lot more in a lot of other brands because you can no longer find those parts. So that's the biggest benefit, from Macintosh. Not flashy, but it does what it does it with the output of any of the products is, high quality, and the builds, behind them are also high quality. So, you're going to get what you pay for. So the 6100, it's, I think I mentioned already, it's 2-channel 70 watts, and I found it to be a great little unit. We're going to go through some features in the next segment, but I liked it. I like integrateds overall because you don't have to worry about, setting things up. Because I move gear around a lot, it's just one unit, and I just can set up one unit. I have the control, and I have the power, and I hook everything up, very quickly. When you have separates, although, you tend to get a little bit better quality when you buy a separate preamp and an amp, and you also get the benefit of being able to swap, those components around. But if you're looking for a quick setup and an easy setup, an integrated just, it's just easier to deal with. And so for that reason, I tend to like it. I've been playing this one all week. I bought this one not all that long ago from the original owner. It came with a matching tuner as well. I don't use tuners much, if any at all. I'm out in the countryside, so don't have a lot of content to reach to. So I tend not to set them up anymore. But integrateds, to me, kind of the perfect balance of everything. You can hook up, any sources. I've had it been playing with this, my turntable this week for the most part, and I have a CD player that I connect to it, and that's my sources, and so that's what I tend to lean on. But I'm going to give you some up-close shots now as best I could. Can't do as well. These mirror fronts, these glass fronts, make it a challenge to get good video and good pictures without seeing the reflection of everything. So I'm going to leverage also the pictures I pulled off of the McIntosh site to speak to it. But anyway, let me show you what it looks like. I didn't do any back shots because I'm going to reference the shots from the McIntosh site and use those. So for my video, I just did from the front here and tried to do the best I could. So, hope you enjoy those. All right, so you got to kind of see some up close there. It's pretty hard to do video of these. They have this glass mirrored front, and I had a real challenge trying to keep myself out of the the reflection here. So I didn't go through as much as I typically do, but I hope you guys appreciated that. I'm going to use a picture from the back of the unit as well. So didn't plan on taking that in the video because I'm going to take a good shot of that and talk to it. So this is the MA6100 from McIntosh. It was manufactured from 1972 to 1979, and it retailed for $700. I'm pretty sure that's the price without the optional wood cabinet, by the way. So let's get into some of the normal specs or features that I typically review. On the power side, again, it has 70 watts. For 70 watts, it gets 15 points. Moving into phonos, has 2 phono connections. Both of those are MM for that no MC capability. So it gets 20 points for the MM for 2 phono connections. Moving into auxiliary and other connectivity for other sources, has 5, I counted 5, in the manual it actually only says 6 minus the 2 phonos, so it would have been 4, but you have 2 tape ins here, so I counted both of those and gave it a total of 5, so that's 50 points. Moving on, it has a balance control, has tone controls here for bass and treble. It has high-low filter switches as well. And let's see, has pre-outs, amp-in connectivity, or the ability to separate those. By the way, I always forget to mention, if you do ever separate those and take them out, your connections there, put them in a little baggie and then tape it to the back, because invariably you'll set them out somewhere and they'll get lost over time. So just tape them to the unit and won't have to worry about losing them. Has an optional wood cabinet, so it gets 20 points for that. AC connections, that's a little unique. It has 3 switch connections, so it gets 30 points for that. One unswitched gets 5 points, has the ability to connect 2 sets of speakers, so it gets 20 points for that. So all told, it gets 205 points. So, you know, not high in, you know, as far as points are concerned. I have some other receivers and some other integrateds that have scored much higher for the same era of gear. So again, it's because McIntosh didn't go and put a lot of extra features on there. Although I do want to talk about some features that they did keep on here that I think were a little dated by this time. But in any case, the one thing I wanted to denote on the back, in looking at the speaker connectivity, there are color codes back there. I didn't quite understand what the color coding was for, but just note that there is a marking there for the common, and so that's your negative connection, and then the other one next to it would be positive. So just note that it can get a little, I think it was a little confusing. I don't think that made a whole lot of sense, but anyway, just note that there's a common print back there that tells you which is the negative, and that way you'll know where the positive goes. The hole to connect them, by the way, it's a little bit small. You know, this is not unusual for this era, but it's a fairly decent gauge. There are smaller ones, so they weren't completely ridiculous, but you have to, you know, get the right size gauge in there. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward on the back panel. There's not a whole lot of uniqueness. The ground connection was sort of in the middle, it's usually next to the phono, but it's not, again, not a big issue, but just a little unusual in that regard. So let's talk about some of the things that I think are unique for McIntosh. The one thing in particular is their modes here for the speakers. And early on, right after the advent of stereo, when stereo was introduced in 1958, it took some time. You know, stereo, like when we moved to digital, you know, for our televisions broadcast, it went from analog to digital. It took time for televisions, you know, to go through people's homes and get, you know, perpetuate through the consumer landscape. And so it took some time for consumers to move into stereo. So there was a number of years where that transition happened. So one of the things that would happen along the way is if you bought a record, it could have been recorded opposite, meaning the stereo left and right channels were opposite of what they should have been. So to compensate for that, manufacturers put the ability to reverse the stereo, the left and right. You had the ability to flip the switch and swap the channels, and that would fix a bad recording. But McIntosh goes a little further than that, and they have the ability here to take your left signal, for example, and then move that to the right channel as well. So you've got only the left going through both speakers. The same for the right. Honestly, I don't know what the purpose would have been. I tried to do a little research and find out in what scenario might you do that, and I honestly couldn't find anything that was convincing that actually explained it. So if anyone knows, let me know. I'd love to know. But that feature, or those features, are on a lot of the gear from the 1970s. They sort of carried that over. And I'd just love to know what was the purpose. If it's on all the units, it must have had an intention. I didn't get much of an explanation or any explanation other than that's what it does in the manual. If it's in there, I missed it. But I would like to know that. So that's an unusual feature that they carried over through pretty much all of their units. The other unique feature, well, before I get there, the one thing that I also thought was kind of interesting on the speaker switch here. On most speaker switches, when you engage which speaker set you want to engage on, the main or the auxiliary ones, you push the button in to engage that set of speakers. On this, it's the opposite. To engage that set of speakers, you unclick it. So the speaker of the button comes out to engage it. I think you can, there you go. So now the mains are on and the remote speakers are off, but so you sort of depress it. So kind of unique. The other button here that's kind of unique is a phase button. So phase is when you have your your negative and your positive speaker wires backwards when you've connected them. So they are then out of phase. And so when speakers are out of phase, and typically this, when it's by accident, you're not sure which wire to connect or which is positive and negative, and you connect them backwards, the woofer is, and the drivers are they're going opposite of what they should be. So you don't get any stereo separation. It's just an unusual sound. And ironically, I found a set of speaker cables that I bought a system some time ago, and when I got them home, they were very nice speaker wires, so I used them, and when I connected them to some other speakers, I realized they didn't sound right, and I knew right away they were out of phase. And so I checked both wires, and sure enough, on one end, they had connected the positive and negative. They had these nice connectors on the ends, termination on the end. And on the other end of each one, they had swapped them. So positive and negative were backwards. So when you went to connect things, everything was going to be out of phase. So they had the system, I recalled, set up for quite some time. And sadly, I'm sure they thought that the system was horrible because it wouldn't have sounded right. So in any case, if you were to do that here and connect your system up, it wouldn't sound right. So why is there a phase? Because if it only happens on one speaker, you have no advantage of moving the phase. Both speakers would have had to have been hooked up incorrectly. So the interesting thing is that was not the purpose of the button. So first, they go through a lot of good explanation of how to set up the system, and mainly how to set it up for stereo, and to set everything as a baseline, and then go through and went through a good detail on how to configure and set up the speakers and connect them. So if you've done all that correctly and everything is set up right, then the purpose of this phase button was apparently some material, some media would come in, be recorded out of phase, which I'm not sure how that happens, but apparently that is a thing, or at least it was. And so to address that, you could switch it here and then swap the phase. And supposedly that addressed it. So that's unique. I can't recall any other gear that I have that has a phase button. So that's kind of unique. So I think that's kind of it. It's McIntosh. Overall, again, you just can't go wrong with it. It's built like a tank. It's still supported by its manufacturer. It's everything internally is higher spec. It's just gear that I'll say can be handed down for generations. It's just of a higher quality, and it's going to be around. And when you find it, it's typically a premium, of course, for that reason. So a lot of fans for it, and there's a reason for that as well. So I think that's it. Hope you guys appreciate the video today. You don't want to miss the next one. Hit that subscribe button, and want to get notified, hit the notification, and give us a like too. That's I don't talk about that, but that helps as well. So I think that's it. I want to thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.